Hey guys, welcome to the Jurassic World Alive video, and after I think it was the A+ tier list, the person who worked on the graphics for the tier list, King Foxy, kind of ghosted on me, so I don't have the graphics anymore, but I didn't want to keep you guys waiting any further, so I decided to take matters into my own hands, kinda. So we're gonna have like a new kind of format for this, the tier list stuff until the graphics department comes back, I guess. So anyways, today we're gonna talk about the A tier on the Jurassic World Alive field guide. We've got a loadout here. It says mine team, but that's just what they call it. I just need some kind of thing to sort dinos, so don't worry about that. Obviously you can't have this many dinos in a team. So I'm gonna go over a few of them. A lot of them don't need too much talking about. A few need some more detailed discussion about. So anyways, let's delve into, let's just go by alphabetical order, starting with Allosino. Allosino, hybrid of Spinotasuchus, Allosaurus, obviously. And then Allosino overall has great stats, and it's almost as good as Thoradolosaur in a sense that it has better survivability to an extent. It does trade speed for the armor, and it obviously has a just straight out worse moveset. So it's kind of like a worse Thoradolosaur in many ways. And it's also kind of not like a worse Thoradolosaur. They're just really different dinos. But Allosino definitely is weaker than Thoradolosaur in many accounts. Although, unlike Thoradolosaur, the upside you have with Allosino is you know what you can beat. You know what you can beat. You know what you lose to. It doesn't have that much of a random factor that you have with Thoradolosaur. Just overall, solid dino. Don't need to go too much into it. Ardent the Maximus, new dino, new, unique. Not too much to talk about it either. It's very similar to Paramoloch in that it kind of does a lot of things, and it's so. Here's how you should approach Ardent the Maximus. So it's basically kind of like a 1.2 Stegod, 1.2, 1.3 Stegod, but not as powerful offensively, and is immune. So there's that, kind of. It's kind of similar to that. Is immune and doesn't have armor. So it's not as tanky as 1.2, 1.3 Stegod. But it has similar qualities. Like, if it was 1.2, 1.3 Stegod, this thing would be busted. But, you know, Ludia knew it was busted, and that's why they nerfed Stegod all the way down to where it is right now. But overall, it's solid tank for what it does. If you do get the crit, then great, a 20% crit. But if you don't, it can still function. But obviously, if you want more damage potential, you would probably want that crit. 1 impact, 1 rampage, not bad multipliers. Base damage is kind of bad, but hey, what would you expect? This thing, it really is really weird. Like, it's really trying to do a lot of things. Like, it's trying to have some damage there with the multipliers, and then also trying to tank, but not really, since its tanking abilities kind of suck. It has high health, but you know, there's that. But like, other than that, it dies a bit easily, a bit too easily to really call itself like a dedicated tank. But anyways, moving on to the next one, Diplodocus. Diplodocus is a weird one and kind of controversial. You could like put it in A tier, or you could put it in A-. I personally thought it was somewhere between B+ to A-, but you know, we got a lot of folks working on this, so it's not my opinion that matter, I guess, the most here. But here's my argument why I think Diplodocus is extremely overrated. Look at its moves: instant distraction, distracting impact, distracting rampage, and definite strike with a precise shattering counter. There's basically 2 scenarios with Diplodocus. It's like it has an on and off button. I think it's really unreliable. Thing being is, if you face the right dinos, if you're facing a Thoradolosaur, or you're facing a Trichosaurus, stuff like that, chompers, slower chompers, you will destroy them. They will do no damage to you, and then you will obliterate them. But if you're facing dinos with say Superiority Strike, Cleansing Impact, Immune, or has immunity, this thing does like absolutely nothing to them. Like, okay, maybe it will do something to Superiority Strikes, and depending on what cleansing move you have or your opponent has, there might be some way to maneuver around them. But immune, obviously, you can't do anything against it. So, like, it's either gonna do great against some of the top tier dinos in the game, or it's just gonna flip over and die and do absolutely nothing against stuff like, Spinotasuchus, Earldom, etc. So I personally thought this should have been a bit lower. It has its potato moments, but also it has the pros that it has, right? And that's why we settled for A tier, I guess. I don't think anyone was arguing for it to be an A+ tier, but I guess it got outvoted in a sense. But anyways, let me know what you guys think about Diplominator in the comments down below. I'd like to hear everyone's thoughts on this one. Anyways, moving on. Gigaspikes, nothing really changed about it. The meta around it changed slightly, well, not slightly, it changed a lot, but it didn't really affect it too much. So Gigaspikesaur is still here. Just overall solid offensive tank for the most part. 40% armor helps it a lot with its slightly lower health for a tank. 109 speed is great, obviously. Damage, even though base damage 900, the medium counterattack does make up for its deficiencies in that department. Alright, moving on. Indominus Rex. You know what? Let's talk about Indoraptor before we talk about Indom. So, Indoraptor. Why the heck did the absolute strongest dino in the game back in 1.2 become such a potato? Well, it got, like, constant nerfs is what brought Indoraptor down to A tier right now, which is pretty sad. Shares the same tier as Indominus Rex. Although Indoraptor is probably still better than Indominus Rex, but it's not better than Indominus Rex to the point where they split a tier. Indoraptor has a lot of problems now. First of all, it has so many counters. It has an unbelievable amount of counters. And aside from that, Indoraptor is the dino that suffered from this patch the most. Of all the dinos out there, a few hundred dinos, Indoraptor suffered the most from this patch. The dodge nerf and the crit nerf absolutely obliterated Indo. So, yikes. It kind of hurts a lot. So that's why it went down a tier. Used to be A+ for the last few patches. For the longest time, it was in the highest tier, but now it dropped down to mid A tier, which is still good. And here's the reason why it's still good. It still has a decent chance to have really good matchup rates, right? Even though dodge got nerfed, and yes, it hurts it a lot. That's very true, especially with the not that great of a health that it has, and 128 speed. Like, 128 speed really kills it now. 128 speed does, like, it really hurts at the moment in the meta. Especially, like, now even 129 speeds are kind of yikes now, because you got your new 131s. Your Prostrathamimus absolutely obliterating everything in the arena. Quetzarion 131 as well. Huge things. So 128 really doesn't cut it. But the reason why it's still up here, it has all around great stats. Like, if you look at its stats all around, look at its moveset, evasive stance is basically useless now. It's kind of like a last resort thing, even though it, for the most part, always was, but it just more so now. It just has great all-around stats. 3.9k health, 128 speed, decently fast, 1460 damage, base damage with an impact, a rampage, impact being a cleansing impact as well. That's cleansing impact's one of the greatest moves in the game. Armor piercing strike, not horrible. Evasive stance, there's some use for it, really niche use for it. But overall, just great rounded stats, good moveset. That's why it hasn't fallen off an absolute cliff yet. It's still a great dino to use. Mid-A tier dinos are good. They're not bad. They're really good. But they just have some flaws with them. Okay. Anyways, moving on, let's go back to Indominus Rex. Indominus Rex isn't as good as Indoraptor. The biggest problem with Indom is its speed, and a lot of people And the reason why Indom didn't slide off a tier is the crit nerf and the dodge nerf does not affect it nearly as much as it affects Indoraptor. The dodge nerf, what sets Indoraptor and Indom apart is Indominus can take hits. It is slow as hell, which is why it's not better, but it can take hits. 4.2k HP, that's 300 HP more than Indoraptor. That actually survives a lot of pretty important matchups. And then 127 speed is where it kind of dies. 127 speed is probably, aside from 106 speed, probably the worst speed tier you want to be in. It's 128 or 127 is pretty bad. And the other part where the crit nerf doesn't really matter too much is Cloak. Unlike Evasive Stance, Cloak just has more, I guess, more offensive utility for the most part, depending on your moveset, but for Indominus, obviously it does. And it's 4 times your armor piercing rampage. As long as you're at the same level as your opponent, they don't have a shield up, they are basically dead. It's really hard to survive a 4 times 1.4k base damage move. If it gets a crit, cherry on top, you really don't need the crit to kill much dinos with Indominus Rex. So, moving on, Paramoloch. Paramoloch is interesting. It's basically a worse Edmontoguandon. No matter how you look at it, it's just a worse Edmontoguandon. Shielding Strike does differentiate it from Edmontoguandon though, which does make it really a great dino. Regenerate and Run is basically, it's not fair. It's not a fair move. Dinos who have Regen and Run are absolutely broken. It's one of the best moves in the game, obviously, especially with 4.8k health. And the reason why Paramoloch isn't as good as the Monoguandon is mainly because of the health, honestly. Monoguandon just has so much more health. The more health you have, the more health regen you get from the Regen and Run. And yeah, even if you look at the multipliers, how you should see Paramoloch is kind of like a hybrid of what Stegoceratops does, plus in Monoguandon, you do have that stun lock potential with a Paramoloch, and then obviously they Regen and Run with a decent health. Where Paramoloch beats Monoguandon is obviously in the speed department. 126 speed is way higher than what Monoguandon has to offer. But Monoguandon, the reason, and this is why Monoguandon is so good, it has Superiority Strike. In most case scenarios, the speed advantage Paramoloch has over Monoguandon is kind of relevant. So, and also decent base damage for Paramoloch as well, so there's that. Moving on to Smilocephalosaurus. Smilocephalosaurus is probably one of the best A tier dinos. This is one of the more borderline A plus tier dinos, if you were to pick one out of all of this whole field. Just looking at it, 1.5k base, 127 speed, that's really important, obviously. You outspeed a Daeodon, you outspeed your Riddex, you're in the same tier as Udasino, right? And this is a really decent speed tier to be in. Paramoloch, right, as well. And looking at its moveset, if only Smilocephalosaurus was like a thing before 1.8, are we in a, yeah, we're in 1.8. It would have been way stronger, especially with the deliberate prowl, right? With a crit chance and stuff. It just has, the thing with Smilocephalosaurus is just, it has so much damage. It has so much goddamn damage. You could start with Precise Pounce, turn 2 Rampage and Run. That's two times multipliers in a row. That's basically a cloaked hit. That does more damage than a cloaked Rampage from Indom if you don't count the armor piercing, which is important, which is why Indom is great. Also has Swap and Stun. Evasive Strike sucks. Deliberate Prowl got heavily nerfed. So those two moves are kind of potato. Deliberate Prowl can get you out of some really tricky situations in terms of you getting debuff, so it's not a bad move overall, but obviously got heavily nerfed there. And Swap and Stun, really great utility move, swap and move. The only thing that's keeping Smilocephalodon from really gaining that higher tier is its speed, and it's part of its strength and its weakness. It's 127, meaning it's faster than 126 and 124, but it is slower than 128, 129, and 131, which, yeah, kind of sucks for it, right? Especially if you're fighting stuff like Daeodon, Proceratomimus. With this low HP, Precise Pounce doesn't help you survive too much against them, so you can't really do much there. Anyways, moving on. Spinotasuchus. Spinotasuchus is an interesting one. The reason why it found itself up in A tier, like, it does so many things right, and also got hurt by the nerf a lot, which is why it's in this weird, mediocre-ish position among the top tier dinos, right? It still has great stats overall, 129 speed, health could be better, but it's not bad overall. Damage, got a nerf, but, or got a buff, but it was because of the crit impact nerf. Obviously, crit got nerfed a lot, and that was a lot of where Spinotasuchus' turn 1 damage comes from, is basically the crit impact. Now that got nerfed, and it's, and now you basically have to rely on its lethal wound and swoop to do most, if not all, the damage, and that's where the damage buff is kind of irrelevant, but the reason why it's still up here is lethal wound and swoop. They're still really absolutely great moves, especially with the dino with 129 speed. You know, you could do this on a Diorajah, you could throw this against Trichosauruses, etc., all that stuff. It's a great 1v1 dino. If your opponent has a dino that you cannot take out with anyone on your team, you can throw out a Spinotasuchus and go for a 1v1, right? And same thing with Suicotator, which is down there. Suicotator is obviously it's a more defensive version of Spinotasuchus. Obviously has more health, instant distraction that helps stall it. So one can argue Suicotator is probably better than Spinotasuchus at the moment, especially with that crit impact nerf, but it really depends on your team's lineup. These two, which one to use over the other, really depends on your team's lineup. So moving on, Stegoceratops. It's not a worse monostegotops. If anyone's saying it's a worse monostegotops, they don't know what the heck they're talking about. Stegoceratops is basically a stunlock monster, which is not what monostegotops does at all. Monostegotops is obviously way better than Stegoceratops at the moment. It used to be the case that they were about the same, but the recent buffs to Monostegotops just makes it an absolute monster. Doesn't mean Stegoceratops is bad. It's still an A tier. A tier is great. It does a lot of things. Solid stats, a lot of health with 25% armor. It can take a lot of hits, this thing. The damage is almost 1.3k, so basically it has great damage as well. 110 speed, fantastic, great all-around stats, and biggest thing about it is it's probably going to attack you 3 times in a row. So, slowing impact, then next turn, boom, stunning impact, then boom, greater stunning strike, 3 turns in a row. If it's faster than you, still decels, or not decels, slowing impact back up. So they hit you with another move. One thing about Stegoceratops' kit that kind of sucks is decel strike is kind of useless. I don't know why anyone would use decel strike on them unless they're setting up for unless they want their Stegoceratops to die so they could set up a revenge kill for their next dino, and if slow impact kills them, then maybe you could just decel strike, I guess. But yeah, that's kind of an unfortunate move. Stegodeus. Stegodeus is an interesting case. This is the resurgence of Stegodeus. Will Stegodeus ever go back to his former glory as the strongest or second strongest dino in the game? That is yet to see. But fun fact for those of you who are relatively new to the game, Stegodeus used to be the second strongest dino in the game. So there's that. But it did get a bit of a damage buff, and that helps it a lot for the most part, and it also works decently well in this meta. You know, a lot of things that you gotta face, Dialorchirus, Eudorinix, those are still things. Not that, I'm not saying it beats it, but it has a decent chance to set up plays for your team. It's kind of, if you're playing basketball, Stegodeus is kind of your passing center. It's like a Marcus Gasol. For those of you who don't know basketball, you have no idea what the heck I'm talking about. But yeah, it does a lot of things. It's a great it's a great team player for the most part. It's not a great 1v1 dino. It's a great team player. So moving on to our last one here, Paramoloch. Paramoloch. Oh my goodness! Every time we talk about Paramoloch, It's the same issue over and over again. It tries to do too much, doesn't do anything especially great. Overall, if you put all those parts together, it's a good dino. If you want to pinpoint what it's great at, it's really hard to tell. Maybe you could say it's a good setup dino. Maybe you could say, oh, it has some decent matchups here and there, which is true, the carousel and all that. But overall, it's lacking a lot of stuff that could bring it over the hump. Just starting from space damage kind of sucks. 126 speed is great, health is great, base damage, base damage kind of sucks. And the thing about Paramoloch, which really pisses me off, is a lot of its damage, because its base damage is so bad, a lot of its damage relies on its 0.5 counterattack to do. And Paramoloch's biggest move is its Greater Stunning Rampage, which, if you stun your opponent, you're not going to use that counter this turn. So, and don't get me wrong, Greater Stunning Rampage is a great move. It's a top 5 move in the game, Greater Stunning Rampage, but it really doesn't work well with its kit. Like, there's so many things conflicting with each other with Paramoloch's kit, but overall, it has some great matchup wins, and somehow manages to stay afloat in A tier still. But anyways, that's gonna be it for this one. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I really need to make these a bit shorter, but like, you guys know me. I like talking about stuff that I'm passionate about, and I like talking about Jurassic World Alive. I like the game a lot. It's a great game, and I like talking about these dinos. So that's why they're so long, I guess. But anyways, again, that's gonna be it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. Leave a like if you did enjoy it, and I'll see you guys in the next one.